Hi there guys, this is going to be video 2 on the M3. In the previous video we disassembled the rifle to this state. Now in today's video what we're going to be doing is reassembling everything and getting it back into shooting condition. Now the impacts are a little different from most rifles in that they have no central chassis. What this means is that they are basically loads of different components all screwed together to create a rigid body. What this means is that they have to be assembled and aligned. There's an order for this, so I'll show you as we start building the block up. But to start off with, what we're going to be doing is getting everything we can onto the block while it's in this form. So let's get started. Okay, so first we're going to reinstall the first reg adjuster screw. 2.5mm Allen key, just screw it down. Now I made a note of where mine was installed before I took it out, and it was just below the countersink there, so I'm going to reinstall it at that, but we can always tell what it is with the gauge on the side. Next we're going to reinstall the little cover plate. That's done with just a flathead screwdriver. You can go ahead and reinstall the gauge now. In my previous video I said that this was a dowty washer. However, on closer inspection it's actually a custom made part. It's just a brass ring to prevent the O-ring from expanding outwards, as you can see there. Not sure why they didn't use a dowty washer, must not have been an off-the-shelf part. But we can screw that back on there, making sure not to pinch the O-ring between the brass piece and the block, like so. Make sure the gauge is aligned, and then we can put the little cover back on. This is just a little cover that I make, and the little white dot there is to show me where the reg's set. It's just a handy little feature that you can look at quickly and see where things are supposed to be. Okay, so next up is the first modified part that we're installing back in the impact. What I've done is I've put a little PTFE spring guide in the back of the hamspring adjuster shuttle. What this does is just allow the spring to be guided as it compresses and make sure it's nice and held in position. The impact already does come with this little thing, however it doesn't do much and it's a bit rattly when it's installed in the gun, so I change them to these. It's not going to be a mod that totally changes the look and the feel of the impact. It's just one of them ones that when combined with a few others it just makes the difference between a good gun and a great gun. When that's in the rifle, what we need to do next is install this. This is the hammer spring adjuster screw mount, and it just screws on in there. However, what we need to do is put a little Loctite on it first, as it does get quite a bashing when it's in the gun. So I like to put a little drop of blue Loctite on the screw, wiping off the excess there. So it's just a bit so it stops it from coming loose, and that's done with just a 2mm Allen key. Want this to be quite nice and tight. Doesn't need to be torqued down to within an inch of its life, but it does need to be nice and tight. The Loctite will also stop it from coming loose. Once that's done, we need to do a fiddly job. We need to install the hammer spring adjuster screw back in. Unfortunately you can't install this first, as you need to get to this screw. Those of you with the quick tune system won't need to do this. This is just for the UK market. Install that there, and what I'll do is I'll screw it in off camera. When the hammer spring adjuster screw is almost installed, what I like to do is just put a blob of blue Loctite on it, and what this will do is provide a little bit of tension when it dries, so that the hammer spring adjuster screw doesn't come loose when you're shooting the rifle. So when we screw it in there, the Loctite will be spread around the threads and should provide a nice soft bond. Once that's in, I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the power wheel. Before I do that, I'm just going to put a little bit of lithium grease inside this track here, just so that the power wheel's nice and lubricated. Also going to lubricate this little spring hole here, as well as the back of the power wheel. Then we can reinstall the spring, sit the ball on top, and then reinstall the power wheel, as with a 2mm Allen key. Spins nice and freely. I'll adjust the hammer spring up properly when the rifle's all together and we can chrono it. It's just left a little shy for now. Once that's installed, I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the safety. What I've got here is a Mark II safety and an M3 safety, just to show you the difference. The main difference between the two safeties is that the orientation of safe and fire has been reversed. I'm not quite sure why they've chosen to do this, however it is a little more comfortable when you've got your hand on the grip. It's not bumping into the safety, so I guess that's why. However, if you like the original Mark II version, you can just swap them over. It is just a straight swap. The laser engraving on the side will be wrong, but as long as you know that, it should be fine. Since I prefer it this way, I'm going to reinstall the M3 safety. So first of all, we need to remove the trigger plate. Again, that's a 2mm Allen key, and then the safety pushes through from this side. Next up, we need to reinstall the ball and spring. Now I'm going to put a little bit of lithium grease in this track here, just so that the ball and spring are nicely lubricated. I find it's easiest to install the ball first, put the spring in at an angle, and then just push it down. Then you can just seat it with an Allen key, like so. And then the little countersunk screw can be reinstalled in the back. Safety works nicely again. I'll reinstall the trigger plate, as we can't install the trigger until we've got the hammer and the C1 all installed. Next up, I'm going to reinstall the regulator. Now I've done a little bit of work with the regulator, so I'll give you an overview of what I've done. Firstly, I polished both the top of the regulator piston and the adjuster screw. That's to a nice shiny finish, just so they better seal on each other. I did make a little post on the airgun forum probably 2 years ago now about improving the AMP regulator, and this is one of the things I've done in that. These two faces are in contact with each other, so the smoother and nicer you can make that sealing surface, the better it's going to work. This is just done to combat reg creep. The other thing I've done is give the Belleville washers a nice polish. You can see the shiny edge there. I've covered this all in other videos, so I won't show it again here, but polishing the Bellevilles just makes them act more consistently and more efficiently. First of all, we'll take our regulator piston and restack the Belleville washers. Now in my regulator, all the Belleville washers are exactly the same thickness, so I don't have to worry about pairing them up and measuring them. I have also gave them a good coat of dry lube. Now, what I've done is I've restacked the Belleville washers. However, what I've done is I've left one off. The original regulator came with 11 Bellevilles and I've just put 10 back. The extra Belleville is not necessary for low reg pressures. The Belleville washer thickness and stack dictates the maximum and minimum set pressure of your regulator. The more spring or the thicker the Bellevilles, the higher your maximum set reg pressure will be. Since this is a sub 12 one, we're only interested in from about 40 to 60 bar. So additional washers aren't needed, and they can induce some creep as they're always trying to separate the two sealing faces. So I'm just going to reinstall 10. Right, that's in my removal tool. I'll just put a little bit of oil on that O-ring and wipe off the excess. Since this is a brand new rifle, I'm not going to bother changing all the O-rings. Next, the regulator body can go in. This is an older one. I've polished and honed that bore in there so that the adjuster screw has a better seal on it. However, there was nothing wrong with the old one, so I'm going to put that in my kit of bits. that can be reinstalled with a 5mm Allen key. Finally, the adjuster screw can be put back in, again with just a small amount of silicone oil on the two O-rings. I applied some silicone oil to the body, this part here, before it went in. I can install that with a 2.5mm Allen key. What I'm going to do is screw it in until it touches the top of the piston, then back it out quarter of a turn. We'll reset the reg pressure at a later date. And lastly, for the block for now, I'm just going to put back the grip. It's done with a 5mm Allen key in the base there. Just do that up nice and tight. Right, that's going to be it for the block for now. I'm going to set this to one side and start work on the back. Right, here's the rear valve block as we left it, completely disassembled. So first things first, we're going to reinstall the steel part of the valve. Just a small amount of silicone oil on each of these O-rings, then just rub it in. Next, we need to align this slot here with the top, and that's going to be aligned with this hole here. Next, we need to reinstall this grub screw with a 4mm Allen key. I like to put a small amount of sealant around this grub screw, just so air can't blow back through this grub screw. What you want to do is screw it in till it touches, then back it off quarter of a turn. Wiggle the valve, find your extreme limits, so the furthest you can go that way and the furthest you can come back, and sort of try and rotate it halfway in between. Then tighten up the grub screw a little and do the same thing. This way you ensure you get the grub screw sitting directly on the flat. Then do it up nice and tight. Once that's in, we can go ahead and reinstall the back piece. If you took your screws out, the two long ones go at the back and the two short ones go at the front, like so. These are done up using a 2.5mm Allen key. What I like to do is tighten them all down and just back them off quarter of a turn. We'll tighten these up at a later date. So the block is free to do a little bit of jiggling around. What this will do is when we put the barrel in, it will help align it, make sure it's all straight, then we'll go back round, tighten up all of these bolts. Next we can reinstall the gauge. What I'm going to be doing is installing a digital one. This is one of the ones that I did the review on, and it just replaces the FX Wiki one. There's nothing wrong with the Wiki one, it's just I like to see the exact bar that the regulator's set out. Take the cover off, then we can just reinstall it in the back there. You don't need any sealant on these, and they don't need to be particularly tight, as long as the gauge is touching the X-ring, it will seal. And there we go, we can align it so that the pressure's at the bottom. Next, we can start to reassemble the valve. So I'll stick the valve block and bring back the plenum and the valve rod. You'll notice on the valve rod I've just made some PTFE spring guides for each end. This one allows the spring to rotate freely, and then this one just carries the end of the spring so that it's not wiggling and juggling about. How much difference these actually make is debatable, but I like to put them on there to make sure that I'm giving it the best chance it's possibly got. When we're happy, we can just push it through the plenum. Like so. Next we can reinstall the little nut. I clean these up. They're normally quite sharp from the factory, and I deburr and countersink each end so that they're nice and shiny and that there's no sharp edges. Then we can do that up with an 8mm spanner. Valve runs up and down freely, nice and sealed, so it's firm but not sticky. Once that's done, we can bring back the valve block and reinstall the plenum. Just put a small amount of silicone oil on both of these O-rings. Then wipe off the excess. Guide the valve rod in the back there, then screw the plenum on. You should be able to see the end of the valve rod in the back here, that little metal thing that's moving there. It should be back from the face a little bit. If it's pushed all the way out, your valve seat's broken and you need to replace it. But since this is a brand new rifle, this is fine. And we can reinstall the gauge cover there. Once the valve and the plenum are reinstalled, what we can do is now join the two halves of the rifle. So putting a little silicone oil over the O-rings, wiping off the excess. Then just install the valve rod through the body, guiding it through the rear hammer spring shuttle, pushing it through there. We'll just nip this Allen key here gently with a 4mm Allen key. Okay, before the top rail and cocking block can go on, we need to install the hammer back in the rifle. It looks a little different from when we last saw it. What I've done is I've installed a Delrin tip and a PTFE guide in the back. The Delrin front is just an upgrade over the C3 bumper, and FAC impacts come standard with the Delrin tip. However, it's a nice upgrade for sub 12 rifles as well. However, if you don't want to install a Delrin tip in your hammer, what you can do is just get a C3 bumper made in Delrin. This is one I've made, and it just is a direct replacement for the C3 bumper. Because I've got the Delrin tip, I don't need the C3 bumper to be installed. The hammer can just contact the back of the C1 and it won't cause any damage. While we've got the C1, you'll also notice that I've put a PTFE guide on the front of the C1. This is just so it guides in the spring in the front here nicely. I'll talk about this valve adjuster in a second. So these need to go in before the top rail. I've also given the spring a good polish on both sides. So we can install that like so. Goes around that way. And the hammer can go in. The PTFE guides on the hammer and the rear shuttle here allow both assemblies to float across the valve rod with no friction. In the standard Impact, what they do is just bore a large hole so the hammer and the rear shuttle can just flap about on the valve rod with no support. I like to put PTFE guides in mine so that the hammer can't rattle up and down inside the block. It's nice and guided and it's always going to strike the C1 in the same place each and every time. The hammer can't lift up at the nose or down or whatever. Okay, so now we need to pull the valve rod out while we install the C1. What I like to do is use the C1, screw it on 1 or 2 turns, and then pull the valve rod out. Once it's out a little way, what I can do is reinstall my little Delrin stop backwards. Since I've given the valve rod a nice polish, what I'm going to do is protect it with a small section of brass. This will just allow me to clamp it with the pliers and not risk damaging the valve rod. I don't bother with the disassembly as I polish the valve rod anyway, and it is quite hard to damage with the pliers. But as I've gone through the trouble of polishing it, the brass is a nice piece of protection. Then we can just take the C1 off, put a small amount of blue Loctite on the face here, wiping off the excess, and just screw it on by hand as far as we can. It will get to a point where it's too tight to do by hand anymore, so what we need to do is use the C1 removal tool again. Now the C1 has a specific distance it needs to be screwed on. That distance is between 6 and 7 millimeters. So periodically what I like to do is release the C1 and then take a measurement. It should be sticking out between 6 and 7 millimeters. What I've done is just put a groove on my C1 removal tool so that I can just hold it up there and quickly ascertain whether it's at the right depth. It looks like it could go in another half a turn or so. There we go. C1 falls nicely within that groove, so I know it's at the correct depth. Okay, now that's installed, I'd like to talk a little bit about this front valve. Now from standard, the UK versions come covered with an anti-tamper cover. However, they still are adjustable when you remove the cap. We have a more limited adjustment than the FAC versions. However, this screw here carries a spring, and when it's done in, it provides more valve return force. Useful tool when tuning, and it can be used to great effect when tuning for consistency and efficiency. What I do is I make a little Delrin top, just pushes over there so that it's nice and concealed. What I'll do for now is I'll leave it fully extended, and then when we come onto the tuning process we'll go ahead and screw it in. This one hasn't been touched and still has the anti-tamper cover on it. This is extremely tough to remove. What I do is I chuck it up in the lathe and I turn it down so it's nice and thin. Then drill a hole in this end and actually use the screw to undo it and pull the cap off. If you don't have a lathe, what I've done in the past is cut it with a Dremel. You have to be extremely careful not to go too deep and into the body of the adjuster. It doesn't cause any major grief, it just looks a bit nasty with a Dremel mark in it. Right, now we can go ahead and reinstall the front valve. I like to put a small drop of blue Loctite on the threads there, as they are quite loose in the body of the rifle, and when you're shooting, this thing is directly taking some of the shock, so it can come loose over time. So a small amount of blue Loctite on the front there, screw it in, and then with an 11mm spanner just nip it up. These don't need to be done up super tight, and if you do them up too tightly they are likely to split. Right, so I'll go ahead and reinstall the cap. Now we can start work on the top rail. So first of all we need to install the rear cocking block. This needs to be aligned axially with the rifle, so what we're going to do is install it loosely first, just in this hole here, and that's with a 2.5mm Allen key. What I've done is I've tightened it up, then loosened it off again. And what we're going to do is install the barrel like so. So the barrel's in and it's aligning the block with the rest of the rifle. So with applying some pressure at the back here to the front, we can go ahead and nip up this screw like that. Now it should be aligned to the rifle. The reason we do this one first is that it can't be accessed when the top rail is installed. Okay, so next up it's the cocking block and the pellet probe. I've already reinstalled the pellet probe in the back here, and that's just with that grub screw there. And I've also applied a small amount of grease to this bottom face here, along the bottom here, and to these 4 Delrin bearings. So what we're going to do now, just lay that on the rifle. What we need to do is pull the cocking block forward until it latches over the hammer. Then we can reinstall the front block loosely. Once that's done, I'm going to just put a small bit of grease in here just to aid with lubrication of the Delrin bearings and along the sides here. This is just lithium grease. Similarly, I'm just going to grease the top of this rail as well. You don't need to pile on the grease, just a light smear will do. Now, I've kept my top rail with the screws in, however, you can see the screw lengths there. 4 long ones at the very rear, 4 shorter ones slightly further in, 1 long one and 1 short one in the middle, and then 2 long ones at the front. And that's it from the other side, just in case you lose or the screws fall out. The front block goes this way up. Then we can just install the front rail. All the screws should line up. Then you can just go around and start doing them up. It's best to start in the middle of the rail and work your way out. So you do these ones first, then these ones, then these ones, then these ones, and the same with the front. You do these ones, then the front ones. It just stops the top rail from bending. You don't want to do these up tight, just want to nip them up, then back them off quarter turn. We'll do the final tightening up in a minute. Once all the bolts are done up but not tight, the chassis of the rifle should be able to rattle about and bend. When we install the barrel now, all the pieces will line up nicely and we can go about and tighten all the screws down. So with just a very light smear of silicone grease around these O-rings and a little bit on the tube there, we're ready to push the barrel through. Right, with the barrel installed, we can go about and start tightening these up. Again, starting in the middle and working our way back and forward. Not forgetting, of course, these ones on the bottom. Right, you'll notice I haven't done them up super tight. It's time now to check the alignment. The bolts are done up tight enough so that everything will be held in place, but we'll tighten them down to final torque in a second. So remove the barrel completely, then reinstall and feel for any sticking points. The barrel should slide through all blocks nicely with no major hang-ups. It's quite tight in there, but you'll feel it if it's misaligned. And the back block here, barrel just scoots through nicely. If the brass part of the barrel hits the side of the block, then the block here is misaligned. You need to loosen that part off and realign it. I'm happy with that. The barrel just slides through nice and easily. No problems there. So what I'll do now is I'll get these all nice and tight. Without a torque wrench it's hard to tell you an exact torque, but they need to be fairly snug. Not too tight as you strip them, but tight enough so that you can feel the bolt tightening down, as you heard there. Right, and that's the blocks and the valve fully aligned. The barrel pulls in and out nice and freely. It's still a snug fit, but there's no major misalignment. I'm going to leave the barrel off for now, as it's a bit easier to manoeuvre the rifle for the camera. Right, that's the majority of the hard work already done. So just a few more things to install. Now that the hammer's in, we can install the trigger. So I'll do that next. Taking the trigger plate off again with 2mm Allen key. Okay, first thing to install is the trigger sear. Now I haven't polished this yet, that'll be coming at a later date. But I'll probably just do it off camera, as I've already done a crown one, and the impacts can be quite tricky to get right. If you take too much off one face, it will no longer cock. So it's one of them things that you've got to leave unless you're sure. But the trigger sear just is installed in this 4th pin back and installed this way up. And then pin number 3 can be installed in the open hole, and that's just the stop to stop the sear falling down. Lastly is the trigger. Now I mentioned in my previous video I didn't like the trigger weight from standard. For some reason FX have started putting in a heavier return spring on the trigger. What I've done is swapped it for a Mark II one, which is slightly lighter and should provide a lighter trigger pull. I'm going to keep this one on hand just in case they've done it deliberately. I can't see anything different in the trigger, however you never know. So the spring there just goes on that screw there. While we've got the trigger out, I just thought I'd tell you what the adjustments do. So this first screw here is the first stage, this last screw at the back here is the safety, then this screw in the middle here is the second stage. So adjusting the first screw here in gives you less first stage. It brings the trigger back like that. Get it to a point and you won't be able to cock the rifle anymore. So you need a small bit of first stage. The second stage screw here just controls at what point you start to feel the second stage. FX's use a fake second stage trigger, meaning what you feel when you pull back and hit the second stage is just that ball bearing hitting a pin, this pin here. When you pull the trigger back far enough, this ball bearing comes in contact with that pin and you feel an increased resistance. So this adjustment is quite critical. Too far in and you'll feel a lot of creep on the second stage. Too far out and you won't have a second stage on your trigger. It will just be a one stage trigger. And the safety screw here, if that's adjusted too far in, you won't be able to engage the safety. Too far out and you'll be able to pull the trigger while the rifle is on safe. So that's all the adjustments. Let's go ahead and reinstall it in the rifle. What you've got to do is just get that spring into the hole on the rear of the sear. Like that. Then realign the pinhole. Might need a little wiggle to get it to seat in there nicely. There we go. Before we button it all back up, what I like to do is put a small amount of dry lube on the contact areas between the sear and the trigger. Only a small amount's needed, as when the rifle's in use the dry lube will travel and coat all the parts that it needs to. And then we can go ahead and reinstall the trigger plate. Right, next we're going to reinstall the cocking arm. Now I prefer the cocking arm on the right hand side, so I'm going to reinstall it on the right. So first of all, what we're going to do is line the rear one up and push the pin through. Then we can just seat that home with a small Allen key. Next, we'll do the same thing for the front. Then lastly, we'll reinstall the cap grub screws, just with a 1.5mm Allen key. Now don't do these up too tight, just get them to touch the top of the pins. If you do them up too tight, what it will do is push the pins into the bottom, and then when you go to remove them, or if you need to flip the cocking arm, they'll be super tight in the holes. So just nipped up is good enough. They're not a high wear item and they shouldn't come loose in normal use. You'll notice I've left the cocking handle off. That's because I'm replacing it. I've made my own, as you can see here. This is the standard one and this is the one I've made. It's a nice black knurled and slightly longer than the original. So I'm going to reinstall that on the rifle. Just pushed on, and then the Allen screw in the bottom there with a 2.5mm Allen key. Snug it down, and there it is there. I made it so it's level with the bottom of the trigger, so when you've got your finger on the rifle, you just nudge it open, like so. Okay, I'm going to leave the trigger guard off for now, as I'm going to need to readjust the reg when I repressurise the rifle. So I'll leave that off and we'll install the top rail and the cheek piece. So first of all, the top rail. Just line it up with the screws there. Screw it down. 2.5 in the back, 4mm in the front. Don't do the screws up tightly, just do them up loosely for now. What you need to do is feel the gap on each side of the Picatinny rail. This gap either side needs to be the same. It is possible to get the rail in slightly misaligned with the axis of the rifle, so you've got to spend a little time, feel with your fingers and make sure the gap's the same. Once you're happy, you can just nip the rail gently. Same with the front. Feel the front, get it to where you're happy. The gap either side is the same. As you can see there, it's possible to misalign it so that it's closer this side than it is this side. So just be careful, take your time and align it properly. Once you're happy with both ends and that they're both the same, you can just nip the screws up nice and tightly. Now the top rail's fitted. Next up is the cheek piece. This is nice and easy, just the 4 2.5mm Allen keys in the top. Whenever you do decide to put your barrel in, you've got to remember to tighten up this grub screw on the side. That's done using a 3mm Allen key. As I said, I'm leaving it off for now, but you can put it on whenever you want. And then the next thing to do is to tighten this bolt down here. And that's done using a 4mm Allen key. It has to be fairly snug, but it is a split collet, so it won't go super tight, it will just sort of feel spongy. I like to stop when I feel a bit of resistance, and that will do nicely. Next, it's time to regas the rifle and reset the regulator pressure, and then adjust the hammer spring. I won't go over retuning the impact, I might do that in a separate video, a dedicated sub 12 impact tuning video. But for now, we'll regas it up, make sure it doesn't leak. There it is gassed up, as you can see there, 150 in the bottle, and we're going to reset the regulator pressure. It's currently set to 8 bar, so we need to come out a little bit. It's done with a 2.5mm Allen key. I like to use a ball end for this, as you can get in without taking the trigger out. We'll just do a small turn at a time. I'm going to be setting this at 55 bar. That's what it was set before I took it apart. So once we get near, we're at 53. I'll do a couple dry fires and let the reg settle. And it's gone back to just under 53. .4. Another couple dry fires. Okay, there we go, just under 56. So I overshot it a little bit, however that should be good enough to start tuning. So I'm going to leave this overnight now, make sure there's no leaks. There shouldn't be. Right, so now we can reinstall the trigger guard. Put it on the bottom there, just with a 2.5mm Allen key. There it is. I've got the K&L extended pick rail on there. I bought it before all the Sabre Tactical stuff came out. And then, last of all, we can reinstall our butt pad. This is one I made. And there we are. A fully reassembled M3. Ready for tuning. Okay guys, that's going to about do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Remember, if you're in the UK and you've just reassembled your rifle, it's time to chrono it. You need to make sure you're under the sub 12 foot-pounds rule. So just make sure that you're under it. Okay then guys, just as a bit of a bonus, I swapped all the M3 parts over to my Mark II. This blue one is my Mark II, the red one is my Mark I. As you can see there, new power wheel, front and rear barrel support blocks and the new cocking block. Fits on there a treat, no problems. It's also got the pellet probe from the M3. So it fits on there a treat. Right, let's go about do it for this one guys. So, hope you enjoyed it, learned a little about the impacts, and I'll see you in the next one.